Today we're learning how to make a coastline double brush to create those parallel lines. Usually these are used on the map to highlight shallow water that surround the land masses. And if you decide to color your map, they should be a brighter shade of blue than the deep water on your map. However, you can also use them to add extra features to your map or to make the coastline look more interesting. You can also combine them with your other water brushes like the hatching shoreline brush seen here. And if you're interested in how to make those, you can check the shoreline brush video over here. Okay, let's begin. We go to Procreate and we're going to create a new canvas 1000 by 1000 pixels. I am going to choose monoline brush because we are going to draw circles and I want the line to be uniform. If you use the brush that has a different thickness, you might end up with an uneven border of your circle, even if you try your best. So you can see that this one is a bit thicker there and a bit thinner here. We don't want that. Hence, I'm gonna go with the monoline brush, which ensures thickness is the same on all sides, and I'm going to choose color black. Now, if you double click close to it, it will snap to it. Now, what we want to do is to draw a circle on the bottom half of this canvas, like so. And I'm just going to run a couple of times to ensure that the line is definitely covered. And with my finger on the canvas, it will stop being an ellipse and it will change into the circle itself, like so. Now, don't worry about the size at the moment. We're going to color that in black, and then using the arrow menu, we will highlight the entire circle because this is the only shape on our canvas at the moment. So with that selected, if you hover over any of those points, and if you don't have a hover option, don't worry about that. You can click on any of them and you will be able to change the size of the circle. Now, because we press that finger on the screen itself, it is the perfect circle, which is 250 by 250. I am going to reduce that slightly to 200 pixels. And as you can see, it does take a second for the circle to adjust. Now, to unclick from that menu, you can press on arrow again and ensure now that the snapping is on, because we are going to center that circle in the middle of our canvas. So I'm going to click on the circle, and to ensure that it is centered, you want to see that orange line going across. Now we're now going to snap it to the bottom edge like so. We're going to keep it slightly higher, and don't worry whether yours look a bit closer or further from the edge. Now we're going to duplicate that layer, and with that one selected, we're going to drag that towards the upper half of our canvas. Don't worry if it's not centered at the moment, because first we're going to resize it as well. So this one I want to make smaller. In this case, I'm going to choose 100 pixels by 100 pixels. And as you can see, whichever corner I choose, it's going to snap to that corner when it's resizing. And that's why it doesn't matter if it's centered yet or not, because we're going to do that now. Now, Procreate likes to resize items if you don't click too close. So if I'm going to try to move it now, it's resizing my circle. I don't want that. But the good functionality is that you can press anywhere on the canvas with the shape selected, and it will allow you to move it even if you don't click on the shape itself. So this is now in the middle of the canvas, and I'm going to slightly move it upwards to make sure that they both align and are in the center. Now I'm going to merge those two layers and then invert the colors. So now you don't see the circles because they're white on white background, but if I untick the background, you can actually see our shape very well. Now we're going to click again and copy our layer. And with that copied, we want to go back to the brush selection menu, and where you got your monoline selected, we're going to slide the left and click on duplicate, because we want to use the same sort of mechanics that monoline brush already has built in. Now, if we click on that again, we will access the settings of the brush. In settings, we're going to shape menu, click on edit, import, and then paste. Once you click on paste, because we copied that layer before, it should show white on black background, which is exactly what we want. With that done, press OK, and you should see the difference of this brush. I mean, it's very tiny at the moment, so you can't really see a lot, but let me show you how to fix that. First, in rotation, we're going to change that value to follow stroke, which means that this brush will constantly follow our brush and those two dots will never connect. They will always stay in the same distance from each other, and they will also follow the stroke path of our pencil. In properties, we can adjust the maximum and minimum size of the brush, which means that if we do increase the maximum size, we can actually make this brush much bigger. Now, as you can see, when we try to do the edges of the brush, it does show as dots. However, if I drew again, they are disappearing. If yours don't, you can always go to stroke path and adjust the spacing to make them smaller and adjust the spacing. The lower the volume, the more dots are in one line and the smoother the brush will look like. Okay, with that selected, and again, this is the maximum size, to max, shape, follow stroke, and then stroke path has only 2% of spacing. Now if we go back to our canvas, and I'm going to turn on the background again, switch off our layer of the brush, and with the black color and the newly created brush selected, I will test how it looks like. Okay, that looks good. If you want, you can also decrease the amount of streamline, which will make your brush slightly more jittery, but it will ensure that your strokes are more precise. Like so. Now I'm going to clear that canvas, because there are a couple of things that you do need to remember when using this brush. If you try to use it in the middle of your canvas, you most likely will end up with some of those little jittery lines. It's because when you check the preview, it's actually two dots and they don't yet know which way your stroke will follow. So if you see any of that, feel free to go in and remove any of those lines that you don't like. Also on the curves, if it's a very sharp curve, because two dots will align together, they will create those little jagged lines as well, which means that you will most likely have to go in and remove those as well. You can always use the standard monoline brush, not the double one, and fix any of those lines to make them look cleaner. Another thing is that because we got those two dots and one is bigger than the other, like so, you will have to adjust your stroke path accordingly. So for example, if I want to go from bottom and outline a little landmass going across on this side of the canvas, this thick line is supposed to be on the land side of the map, which means that we will have to draw that line again going from the top. Now, as you can see here, because we've reduced that streamline, you can see a little bit of a wobble in your line. If you like to leave it here, obviously you can do so. I will increase my streamline to be max because I want smooth look of those lines. Now, obviously, the slower you go, the more control you will have over that line. But because of the streamline turned on, the line itself will end up being very smooth regardless of the speed that you're going with and regardless of your shaking hand. Now, obviously, those lines will create a little problem when you want to add them to your islands. However, there is a quick fix to make sure that that line will still look good without those extra dots or any imperfections. So first of all, we have to see how the line goes. Now, I'm going to start from the bottom because my thicker brush is going on the inside. So to create an island, I will go like so. And then I'm going to tidy up those lines so they look perfect. And for that, I'm going to use my standard monoline. Maybe slightly bigger size than 20. And here you go. This is our outline of a perfectly shaped island. Now, I have done some tests of the brush previously, and with the quick few lines you can create a nicely looking map with no effort whatsoever. I have added those hatching lines to ensure that it's clear where the water is and where the land is finishing. However, I have seen people use the same coastline brush without using the water hatching lines as well. If you change the size of the brush itself, the distance between two dots will decrease, but also their size. So the thickness of the lines will not be uniform. It will decrease in proportion with the distance between them. So for example, if I'm gonna make it very small at 10%, you can see that that distance is much closer, but also the thickness is reduced. On the other hand, if you try to increase that size, the distance between the two dots will increase, but also the size. So as you can see, there is quite a big difference between those two. So just some things to keep in mind. Obviously, you could go back and recreate that brush with smaller circles. That means that you can still increase the size between them without thickening the lines themselves. So if you decide to make that distance between those two slightly bigger, go back to your original design and you can make each of those circles slightly smaller to ensure that you have the desired effect. If you reduce the size of those two circles, that means that the distance between them will increase and the size of the lines both on top and on the bottom will look thinner as well because of the smaller size of both of those circles. Now I'm happy with how mine turned out, so that's 200 pixels and 100 pixels, but if yours doesn't work for whatever reason, you can play with those sizes and see which one works best for you. Obviously, one thing to remember is that if you created any other of my stamp brushes, and you can check for example the mountain one here on the corner, you might want to rethink the difference between the thickness of the coastline brush and the thickness of the artwork that you've created for your stamp brushes as well. So in this case, it's not that big of a difference. You can still see that the line for the land itself is slightly thicker than the mountains and the trees themselves. So I could go back and lower the thickness of the circles themselves to align them better with my already existing brushes. And it would be easier than changing obviously the thickness of the stamp brushes that I've made for the trees and the mountains themselves. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. If anything doesn't work the way it should, let me know as well. Play around with the size of the circles and the distance between them to align them with your needs. That's it for today. Have a great time creating and I will see you in the next one. Bye!